Okay, so in this video, we're going to specifically be talking about halogenated hydrocarbons. We're going to talk about how to name them and how to draw them, and then also some of the different examples of them and where we can find them in the environment. So first of all, halogens are a different group on the periodic table. It's group number 17. So this includes number 9, which is fluorine and bromine and iodine. Okay, those are examples of halogens that we're going to see connected to a hydrocarbon, which can form something called a halogenated hydrocarbon. Instead of having a hydrocarbon that's just filled with hydrogens around the carbons, a halogen would just be replacing one of those hydrogens or multiple ones of those hydrogens and be in that place instead. So when we're naming them, this is the rules that we follow. So we name an alkane, alkene, or alkyne in the parent chain, just like the way we were doing that in the previous examples. Okay, we follow the exact same rules. Okay, then what we're going to do is pretend like the halogen functional group that you find is kind of like a branch, like a methyl branch on an alkane, alkene, or alkyne, and we're going to name it similar to that. So it's going to be named alphabetically, okay, and we're going to use these as our startings to our names, our prefixes to our names. So if there's a fluorine, we're going to say fluoro, okay, etc. So that's kind of the general idea of naming halogenated hydrocarbons. So let's actually practice this in reality. So if we have our first example here, we have 1, 2, 3 carbons on our chain. So because it has 3 carbons, we're going to call it prop, okay, propane, because it has only single bonds. And we also have this off of it, a chlorine. So what we're going to name it is, we would name it 2, because it's off of the second carbon, 2-chloro, and then the ending of the word would be propane, because it has 3 carbons and they're all single bonded together. So that's all we have to do for that first example. For the second example, we have a bromine and a bromine right there. We also have a double bond, and we're going to number this 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, I'm numbering it this way in this opposite direction because this bromine is on this side. I want it to be as close to the lowest number as possible. Okay, so I would say that the answer here is 1, 3 dibromo, because I have 2 of them. And then the ending of the word is going to have 4 carbons, which is bute, but it also has that double bond. So I'm going to say bute, and it's between the second and the third, so 2-ene as my answer. So this next example that I have here, I have a bromine right here, I have a bromine right here, I have a chlorine, I have an iodine. So I got lots of stuff going on. I have 2 carbons. Okay, I could name it either way and it wouldn't matter. So I have to put these in alphabetical order. So I would say that B comes at the start of the alphabet. So I would say 1, 2, dibromo is my first part of my name. Then I'm going to look at putting chlorine next because it's next in the alphabet. So I'm going to say 1-chloro, and then I'm just running out of room, so I'm going to have to go to the next line. Then I would put iodine next. So then I would say 1-iodo, and then I can finally name the actual carbon chain. Okay, because I have 2 carbons, it would be ethane, and there's only a single bond, so I still have to say ethane. So that is how I would name that example. Okay, my last example, I have a bunch of stuff going on. So I have bromine and a bromine and a bromine. Okay, I also have a chain right here. I have a triple bond. I got lots of stuff going on. So I'm going to number this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as my parent chain. So I know that my parent chain, because it has 6, is going to be hexyne or hex 1-ine with a Y and E. But I also need to number my words. So this is an ethyl branch. And then bromine. Okay, if we're doing alphabetical order, we would have to name the bromine first because it's B before E. So I would say that I would go 5, 5, or I guess I would say 4 before 5. And then I would say tribromo. Then I would label my ethyl branch, which is 3 ethyl. Again, I'm running out of room. So I'm just going to move to the next line. Then I'm going to label the end of the word. So sorry, I wouldn't actually have this dash here. I'm just going to move to the next line. So hexane, but it would be hex 1 YNE. So I wouldn't have this here. It would just be ethyl straight to hex, the hex part of the word. So that is how I would do some examples for halogenated hydrocarbons. Now I want to know how to draw my halogenated hydrocarbons as well. So what I would do for this is the exact same thing as what I was doing for my names, but this time I'm just going to draw the picture. So my first picture here, I have ethane. Ethane has 2 carbons. So I'm going to draw my 2 carbons. And then it says 1,2-dichloro. So I have a chlorine off of my carbon and off of my other carbon. And then I would also have hydrogens off of it everywhere else. Okay, to just simplify it, I can just draw lines for the hydrogens. I don't actually have to draw the hydrogens out if I don't want to. Okay, so that's that one. Next, I have my 1,2-dibromoeth1ene. So I'm going to have a double bond. My ethene would have 2 carbons. This time it's double bonded together. And this time I have bromine. So I would go bromine here and a bromine here. And then the other bond on my carbons would be a hydrogen. So I can just leave it blank. Or you can write the hydrogen if you would like. So that should be that picture. Let's go to the next example. So 1,1,2,2 tetrabromoethane. So ethane still has 2 carbons connected together. And I would have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 connections. I would have 2 of them being bromines on either side, and then these 2 blank ones would be my hydrogen. This, sorry, is a mistake. Just ignore that. Okay, and then my last one here, I don't have any room, so let's draw it over here. So 1-chloropropane. Propane has 3 carbons. And then it says 1-chloropropane. So off of the first carbon, I would have a chlorine, and then the rest of them would be hydrogens. So for that last one, it would just look like that. So just so we know some examples of halogenated hydrocarbons, we have chlorofluorocarbons, which are called CFCs, because they have a chlorine and a fluorine functional group connected to them. So CFCs are also called Furions, and they're used in refrigerants. So like things in our fridges, in our air conditioner units, they help cool things off. Okay, but they're also not very good for the environment. If they get released into the environment, they can actually cause the ozone to be depleted, which is not great, but we'll talk about that later in a different video. Okay, other halogenated hydrocarbons. So for example, DDT. This is the actual structure of DDT. You can see that there's a benzene ring, which would include carbon and hydrogen. And then we have a bunch of chlorines. So DDT is definitely a halogenated hydrocarbon because it has a carbon and a hydrogen, but also a bunch of chlorine. So DDT was that pesticide that they used a bunch in the early part of 1900s, so like in the 50s and 40s and stuff like that. They figured out that it was really bad for birds' eggs. It was causing them to be really, really weak, and basically the birds were dying before they were able to be like developmentally like able to leave the egg. So they stopped using them, and now it's banned in most places of the world. But it was a super good pesticide to get rid of mosquitoes, so we really liked using it way back when. There's also this example, which are called dioxins. So dioxins are, again, a halogenated hydrocarbon. We use them in a bunch of different things like paper or pesticide byproducts, thermal power plant emissions, like PVC pipes and plastics that we create, waste things. So again, something that's super important in lots of things that we use, but not super good for the environment. And another halogenated hydrocarbon is called a PCB. So this is something that we use in older electronic devices. Again, it's not very good for the environment. And the last one is toxaphene, which again is another type of pesticide that is no longer allowed to be used. So you can see all of them had lots of chlorides connected to them, or chlorines, I should say, connected to them. So these are persistent chemicals in the world. So they can be stuck in the soil or a water supply, or they can be in the atmosphere. Furions is one I didn't mention above, but Furions is something that, like a preservative in food, it is technically deemed safe by the FDA. But again, it's something that just sticks around in the environment for a really long time and doesn't ever break down or biodegrade. So not super good. And then the last one is BPA. Again, it's a halogenated hydrocarbon. It's something that's found in plastics. So that is why some things are not necessarily good to be used for drinking out of, like containers that we use for food. And there's these symbols that we find on different types of plastic so that you can tell whether or not it has BPA in it or if it's safe to be using in our like food containers or our water bottles.